Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HTML All the Things podcast, episode number 32, Jquery to Vue.js. I'm your host, Matt Lawrence, and I'm joined again by my co-host, Mike Curran. What have you been up to this week, Mike?
Yeah, hey, Matt. So this week has been just pure mind-boggling client work, pretty much. Just crazy deadline coming up, trying to get everything done. Had to pivot a couple times, a little throwback to our last episode on the pivoting. But yeah, just literally trying to project manage, develop, teach, and everything at the same time. So lots of productivity stuff, actually. I think after we wrap couple of these projects up, we'll probably do another episode on productivity and productivity tools. That's in my thought process here, because I've been going pretty ham with the to-do lists and the Kanban boards on Jira. There's just a lot of different project management tools. They've all been helping quite a bit, some of them not so much. Probably a good amount of insight on that, but that's about it. What about you, Matt?
So same sort of deal, not so serious of a deadline, but we have a lot of projects kind of coming to the review close, if you will. So we have a lot of stuff that's kind of mostly been developed. Like I've pretty much finished a few websites while you've been working on this one larger project. And basically now in the stage of communicating with clients, getting them to actually test it out, making sure the UX is good for them, making sure they understand stuff, filling in any gaps, fixing bugs, that type of thing, and hopefully get those projects actually launched within the next week or two here. But most of the work's done on them, which is very good. I've also started working on, or started planning rather, to actually start looking into getting some of that offline functionality working on No BS News, like I mentioned last week. So once these projects, kind of clear out, or at least when the clients are reviewing them and I have a spare moment, I'm going to start digging into service workers and how all that works, and hopefully getting something done in that department. But before we jump into this episode, as always, we're going to go over the segments. So this is a Mike-heavy episode, actually. Segment number 1, the state of jQuery. Segment number 2, from jQuery to Vue. And both of those are going to be run by Mike. And then I'm going to kind of go into the other segments here today. So our recurring, or our occasional recurring segment, useful resource. This time it's about meta tags, learn about that when we get there, as well as a very long, actually about a page long here, web news, laser focused in a scatterbrained industry. So hopefully that title piques your interest there. So we're going to pass it over to Mike there for segment number 1.
All right. So let's get right into it. Segment number 1, state of jQuery. So just going to give a quick overview of what jQuery is. So jQuery is a JavaScript library mainly targeted at HTML document traversal, document manipulation, event handling, animations with a little asterisk there, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, and AJAX requests. So it's meant, like the whole point of jQuery was to make it so that your code was a little bit easier to digest and a little bit easier to write. It kind of shortened, it put a lot of shorthands for a lot of the more robust, more like multi-line JavaScript, native JavaScript functions, maybe like a few years back. So essentially it's meant to be something like assigning event listeners to all the elements of the same class. It's meant for creating DOM elements such as divs and spans and stuff like that dynamically through JavaScript. It's meant to use the $.AJAX shorthand to interact with your API server calls. So, a way for you to get and receive server calls and interact with an API. And the main theoretical advantages of something like a jQuery were supposed to be the code becoming easier to read. You get to write less code. And then one thing that kind of arose because it was such a stable framework and such a stable, more a library than a framework actually, over the years, is that it became very standard for a developer, and the familiarity started to rise. So what that means is that a lot of developers started knowing jQuery and started really delving deep into jQuery. So when you hired someone or when you had a senior developer, they usually knew jQuery really well, and it made their development process a lot faster. So lots of developers like have used jQuery for years and can write it without looking at documentation. And it made it so that switching to any other library like jQuery was kind of a very time intensive and a costly venture for a really long time due to its dominance. So jQuery has now been around for over a decade, actually. So it's been around since 2006. As with everything in our field, like, with all the new technologies coming out, Gatsby, Vue, React, like constantly evolving, it has started to see and kind of be seen as an ancient technology. And I wouldn't agree with that kind of labeling. Like, it's, people are saying it's useless, and people are saying that like you should just never use it anymore. I'm not of that kind of mindset, but I do see, having used it for the better part of my web development career, I do see its pitfalls, and I do see why the transition to something else is happening. So something that is a pitfall, or some of the reasons that it is kind of being phased out right now, would be, one of the things is the transitions. So the fade ins, the fades outs, the animations that jQuery provides for your elements are not very well optimized. They're not piggybacking on CSS transitions or animations. They're actually doing their own JavaScript functionality behind the scenes. And it looks kind of janky sometimes, honestly. Like when you do a fade out or a fade in, you can try it, compare it to a transition, display none, and see the difference in how smooth the transition is compared to the fade out of the jQuery animation. The other thing is that large transversal, so doing a large transversal of a DOM element, can be often seen as bulky, and it can often lead to higher execution times, especially in comparison to native JavaScript solutions. So you're adding that level of complexity where sometimes it's not needed, and you're adding that level of like just the amount of time that a function needs to take, because it's the jQuery code is very universal. It's built so that it supports, IE 5 or 6. Like it's built so it supports a really old framework, so it has to use some older technologies, and in that way it kind of gimps itself to the point where it's not as efficient as just using the native JavaScript solution. And on that topic, as JavaScript has grown up over this past decade, the JavaScript APIs have improved to the point where a lot of the functionality of jQuery is now seen in native JavaScript. So it becomes very hard to recommend a new developer, and I'll talk about this a little bit more at the end, but it becomes really hard to recommend to a new developer to go into jQuery when JavaScript has almost all, if not more, of the functionality and the ease of use aspects to it now with ES6 and the support it's getting and how it's evolving over time. So those really are the main reasons to not, I would say, use jQuery. And with the emergence of large JavaScript frameworks like React, like Angular, like Vue, jQuery has really lost a lot of ground because it doesn't integrate with these frameworks very well. It is possible to integrate jQuery into one of these frameworks. Like if you have an old school developer that's working on one section of your framework and he's like, I need jQuery 100%. There's no way I can get around without jQuery because that's just my mindset. It is possible to integrate jQuery even on a component-to-component basis in Vue.js, and maybe I'll do a guide on that at some point. I'm not a big proponent of it because it's seen, it's a very resource costly and a redundant thing. So it's like you're integrating a system where the actual solution is already in place. So Vue.js handles a lot of the stuff that jQuery does better than jQuery itself. And the reason you're using Vue.js is you want to get out of the way of using a native JavaScript or a jQuery solution. So why, put it back into the Vue.js and add whole other framework on top, or a whole other library on top of your Vue.js installation? It doesn't fully make sense unless you're talking about it from literally a familiarity kind of standpoint where you just need to have it to create that project as fast as possible. So with that, it kind of perfectly segues into our next segment. I'll open it up to Matt if he has any comments on just straight jQuery, if he has any experience that he wants to share or anything like that.
Well, one of the things that kind of hit home there was the fact that you mentioned, like, if you have an older developer, and I mean older as in like has been in the industry maybe for, let's say, 5+ years. But what's super interesting about that is I remember when we first started, I can't remember exactly what app it was or what website it was, but I needed to do an Ajax request for something. And I remember I had, made the whole page up. I was still doing mostly UI stuff back then. So I made the whole UI, did all the transitions, made it all look nice, whatever. And then I was like, okay, I need to fill in my table with, I think it was dynamic data. And I remember just being like, okay, well, I already have a bunch of these transitions and stuff done with jQuery. I'm like, or with JavaScript, I'm like, I'm just going to go and do like an Ajax request with JavaScript. I'll go look that up. And everybody, I remember, for the most part, on Stack Overflow and stuff back then was like really hammered down on the fact that they really, really wanted they really, really wanted everyone to just use jQuery. Like, oh, it's just easier to use jQuery. Just use jQuery. And I was like, no, like I'm already done, several lines, I don't know if it was hundreds of lines or what it was. It was a pretty simple web page, but I've already done most of this in JavaScript. I'm not going to just randomly also import jQuery just to do an Ajax call. And I really think that mentality is probably the biggest change that we've seen in probably the last 3-4 years, I'd estimate. That before everything was just like, oh, just use jQuery. And sure, you'll probably still hear that today, but you're not hearing it, half as much. And you are starting to see those admittedly clickbaity at sometimes, is jQuery dead or jQuery's dead, that type of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's still using jQuery. If you want to learn it, go ahead. It's not going to be gone tomorrow. But learning JavaScript is a really good base, and in my opinion, is kind of a better thing. And I think the mentality in general in the industry is starting to turn to that, and starting to turn to things like something newer, like Vue. And so it's just kind of an interesting take on just something as simple as like a UI change. People, even a few years ago, were so adamant on using jQuery. So that's just kind of my 2 bits. I'm sure that anyone who's been learning over the last couple of years has probably experienced the same thing on Stack Overflow.
Yeah, and for sure, like that's kind of been my experience as well. And we like we've said multiple times throughout this podcast, we started without jQuery, and we were actually initially very adamant against using jQuery because we wanted to learn as much of the core basic JavaScript behind it as much as we could before we had to use it. I mean, it came to a point where I had to integrate with the customer's project. I had to use jQuery, and I've been using it quite a bit ever since. I still use it on some older projects. Which is why I don't really I don't fully believe the whole rhetoric of is jQuery dead in 2018 or 2019. It's not dead, I would say, but it's one of those things where a lot of people are still using it. It probably still takes up a very large percentage of the web compared to something like a Vue or even React. Like there's probably more jQuery run sites or jQuery integrated sites than there are React sites, in my opinion. And this is an opinion, I'm not 100% sure. But the thing is that when you're a new developer and you're looking forward, what do you do? Should you learn the thing that is powering most of the web, or should you learn what the thing that will be powering the web when you're going to be working there? And that's kind of the balance that you have to come up with. Sometimes, I'm sure that there's a lot of successful developers even right now that if they went fully into jQuery, they'd find a job that, is supporting older code in jQuery and they'd be doing really well. That's not to say that that's not possible, but it depends on how you want to approach your career. So with that, I'm going to move on to the segment number 2, from jQuery to Vue. So as with anything new, it will take some time to adapt to a new way of developing. So if you're a jQuery developer by trade, or if you're just a straight JavaScript developer by trade, it will take some time to go from something like jQuery to a full-on framework-based Vue.js workflow. There are key differences with how jQuery handles things and how Vue does. Examples, like just quick examples, and I'll get into a little bit of technical talk here, so just stay with me. But here's very quick examples of some very specific differences between the two. So assigning a function to a DOM element such as a div or a button. In jQuery, assigning a function is done in the script tag by using, a selector. So you're using a $ with brackets, and inside of that, you're either, selecting it by all the classes or selecting it by a single ID, however you do it. So you're using a selector to select the classes in the script tag, and then extending it with their class .click or .change, whatever you want to, the event you're looking for to add to that button or that div. And then in that dot change or dot click, you're passing in a function to do something in that function. And then you're doing whatever you need to do on that click, either, making the button active and go navigating to the next page, whatever you want to do in that function, you're doing in there. And that's all done through the JavaScript section. It's all done in the script tags, and it's using these like selector, these $ selectors, or if you're using native JavaScript, you're using document.getElementById by ID or .getElementBy by class name, however you want to do it. It's the same thing. So in Vue, we take a different approach. So in Vue, you're doing it a lot of your assigning is done in the DOM /template section. And it's very much tied to the actual div element that you're creating, or the whatever element that you're creating. Doesn't have to be a div, of course. What you do is you can assign them to any event what you want. So again, like a dot click or a change event or a click event. You're just doing it a little bit differently. The syntax for it is a quick @ click and then equal to, and in quotes there you would put the method name that you want to run. Methods are a little bit different than functions. They are the same. Like methods are essentially the same as function, but method is registered in the Vue instance. And you can use it. You can pass something into a method. You can use a method without passing into it. So essentially, you just declare your method in the Vue instance, and then you use it inside of the DOM element, as opposed to going in the jQuery way, where you in the script tags in the actual JavaScript section, that's where you assign and use. So that's one major difference. Another one is transitions and animations. Like I said before, the transitions in jQuery were kind of now are seen as janky. There's a fade in and a fade out transitions that can be accessed through, again, the dot class extenders. So you get your selector, you select your element, your by class or ID, like I mentioned before, and then you add a dot fade in, and you can pass some properties into the fade in for that. So that you kind of activate it all from your JavaScript, again, your script tag section, to be able to fade in, fade out. There's plenty of other animations that I'm not remembering right now that I've used. I think there's even a slide animation or something like that. But essentially, yeah, again, jQuery very much done in the JavaScript script tag side. Vue has a little bit different, where you actually can put a transition tag around the element that you want to transition. So if you have a div that needs to fade in, if it's hidden or not hidden, you can put the transition tags around it, name your transition something inside of the transition tags, give it a name, and then in your CSS you can go in and actually, using that name, create a CSS class with a transition inside of it. And so it knows when you do something inside of this transition tag, whether it be a if statement that shows or hides an element, or switching between elements, it knows that whenever you're doing something with Vue inside of that transition tag, it's going to run this transition on it. And it can be a transition actually, or it can be an animation. So again, it's binding it to a native CSS transition or animation, which runs way better than a jQuery animation, in my opinion. Or actually, it's not even an opinion. It's not subjective. It's very much objective in this case. It just looks better. It runs at a higher FPS. So the next thing is adding and removing classes conditionally or programmatically from a DOM element. So in jQuery, it's done by, again, using the selector, the $ selector, by class name or by ID. In the JavaScript or the script section, you find your elements, and then what you do is you can, again, extend it with a dot class extender. The dot class extenders in jQuery are dot add class or dot remove class, and in brackets you can put the string of the class that you want to remove or add. So it's very programmatic. You can kind of get all your elements in one quick go with a $ and with the $ selector, and then getting a class name. It'll put all your elements in there, and then you can remove a class from all the elements, or you can do it by ID and get only one element back and remove a class from that ID specifically. It's very extensive. I've been using it for so long that it took me a little bit while actually to switch to the Vue.js method. So the Vue.js method is a little bit different, where again you're in the DOM in the template HTML tags, and you're binding a class to each element. So when you're actually writing your div tag, you use the typical the colon notation to bind a class, so colon class, and inside of there, on each element, you need a conditional class like an active class. Let's give an example of what we're trying to do. So we want a div to have an active class when it's clicked on or when it's selected, so that it, when it's active, it shines blue or however you want it. So you need an active class to appear and disappear based on if it's selected or not. So in Vue, what you would do is you would literally have a div, and inside that div, you would bind it a class with the colon notation, have a class, and inside of the actual selector, inside of the actual equal quotes, you would put a conditional statement, and the conditional statement would look something like this: active, which is your class name, colon, is active, which is the binding of a variable or data property, your Vue.js data property. So is active is your Vue.js data property that you're kind of toggling. It can be whatever you want it to be, but typically you want it to be a Boolean, which is true or false. And it can be activated by a method. It can be activated by a function of a different thing. So you click on one element and this is active. Let's say it toggles from true to false, or false to true. And as soon as it becomes true, the is active variable, it automatically activates the active class, because that's how this condition statement works inside of the Vue element. So again, that's active. You have inside of curly brackets. You're kind of making a function inside of there. You're doing an active colon is active, binding the active class. So that's the class name that you want to a variable that you can control programmatically called is active. Make it true or false. Based on that, it'll be on or off kind of thing. So this is a very quick way of just noting the differences, and there are considerably more differences between the two. I mean, quote, we're comparing a library and a framework. Obviously, there's going to be major differences when you're doing that, but those are some of the main differences that I've run across. There's also other differences, like AJAX requests are handled completely differently. In Vue, they have a native library called Axios. It handles AJAX requests a little bit differently with a .then kind of promise method. And then there's also how to create dynamic DOM elements. Vue.js is built around creating, dynamic DOM elements, so it's much easier and much more intuitive to create them. You do it right in the DOM section, again using some very particular Vue code inside of the Vue HTML code inside of the DOM section. Whereas in jQuery, it's all created in JavaScript, and it's much more janky to create DOM elements. When you want to create element div or something like that. So again, many differences. I'm not going to be able to cover all of them here. Actually, one of the reasons that we decided to do this episode was because I'm actually writing an article right now where I'm going to be going through in much more detail and with actual code examples of each of these differences. So, or at least a good subsection of them. So you can actually go and check that out when we have that released. We'll definitely announce it on the podcast. But yeah, I'm working on that. Hopefully have that out to you as soon as we can. And really, in the end, making this transition from jQuery to Vue is a hands-on experience. It involves a significant amount of work and adapting and learning new skills, but not to say that it's overly difficult. And this comes back to our statement that we consistently make, that if you get that good, pure JavaScript base, switching between different libraries, frameworks, technologies becomes a lot simpler for you. If you just know jQuery, that's great, obviously, but it's a little bit more difficult to grasp concepts and grasp different frameworks, how they work under the hood and stuff like that, and be able to really understand a framework and get into it without knowing how, jQuery works. And so my recommendation as of right now for someone that's just getting into becoming a developer, maybe you're in high school and you're thinking of becoming a developer, I don't think it's worthwhile to go in and pick up jQuery and learn it, especially not as a first thing to learn inside of JavaScript. I know a lot of people actually started with jQuery before they learned JavaScript. I don't think that that's the correct approach. I think it's more important for you to right now learn JavaScript first, learn the basic concepts of it, become comfortable the fact that you know JavaScript, if that's what you're kind of going for. If you're going for a front-end developer, you want to know, get comfortable with JavaScript, and then go to a framework. And a framework would be, your choice between Vue.js, React, Angular, whatever you want to choose. I'm not going to promote one of them right now. There's many differences, many advantages. There's not really a point in fully comparing them. Just know that there's essentially just the big three, and now it's kind of approaching the big two between Vue.js and React moving forward. But there's plenty of reasons to use both. And again, like with the fact that JavaScript already has most of the features that jQuery brought 10 years ago, it becomes kind of irrelevant to learn it unless you have a very specific use case where like you have a friend that works in the industry that has a job for you lined up, but he needs you to know jQuery. Like I can see that case. Maybe you learning jQuery in that sense, but even then, you're really pigeonholing yourself if you're just going to go straight into jQuery and learn it up and down. I think it will be phased out as the time goes on, and it's not as important to learn at this point, rather than maybe how it was 5 or 6 years ago when we were starting out, or 4 years ago. And that kind of brings it to a close on the comparison of the two. Again, stay tuned for that article. I'll be going into a little bit more depth on the comparing Vue and jQuery. And yeah, that's it for this segment. I'll pass it off to Matt if he has any comments on it, or to move on to the next one.
No, I think it's a good idea that you are doing an article, though, because I think a lot of people would want to see the actual code snippets rather than just hear them, which like hearing them is fine, but like actually seeing them and like so they can actually copy paste them into their own projects and that type of stuff is definitely a good idea. So good on you for that, and make sure that you stay tuned, and I'll be obviously tweeting and all that stuff when that comes out, once Mike is not so swamped. But in the meantime, let's do the occasional I keep forgetting the name of this segment, the occasional recurring segment, useful resource. And this one's about meta tags. So specifically, it's about metatags.io. So metatags.io can help you investigate existing, help you modify or create meta tags for your website across multiple platforms. So you're able to type in a URL, which will pull in all the detected meta tags, such as the photo, the title, and the description. And then from there, you're able to see exactly what your metadata will look like in Google, as well as other popular services such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and Slack. If there's something that you need to add or change, you can do that right on the web page. And then when you're done, simply click on the Generate Meta Tags button, and a new snippet of code containing your changes will be generated so you can paste them into your head tags. So a lot of people might think like, oh, this is like a pretty easy thing. Like you could just look at your own head tags. It's just a few tags. Why is it that you're doing this? So one of the reasons why we went and searched this out, and I will actually be using this for future websites that we even make custom, is actually because of Webflow. So our specific our specific use case rather was because we've been working a lot on Webflow sites recently, and in Webflow you're able to set things like a site-wide meta tag. You can also set static ones per page, dynamic ones based on CMS data, or even with a little bit of configuring, you can allow users to edit their own meta tags, specifically in the Webflow CMS, if you know how to do that type of configuration. And because there are so many options affecting meta tags in that sort of particular scenario, checking out the metadata in metatags.io really helped us actually inspect the dynamic data and see what's working out. Maybe, explain to the customer like, hey, we make this a little bit better. Maybe you should be targeting this stuff. So make sure that they're doing it properly. Make sure that you actually configured it properly, making sure everything's working smoothly on the people end as well as like on the Webflow end, essentially. And it also allows us to check what things look like on a customer's preferred platform. So for example, if they prefer to post on LinkedIn and the images that they're uploading doesn't look good, maybe you need to add another image field to the CMS that, has a little help text that says, hey, maybe you should be doing it in this resolution, that type of stuff. So it's really just like a sanity check. But what I really like about it is that when you do a quick check on something, so for example, we have a couple of websites that are pretty old now, and they don't have, let's say, all of the meta out there. They don't have like all the stuff for Facebook, like all the open graph images and that type of thing. You can simply type in your URL, get the data that it does detect, maybe the title and description is the only thing you have, then you can put your own image in there. Like you could upload the image right to the website itself, just so you could see it in a preview form. And then all you do is you can click generate meta tags, and it will generate you all the meta tags that you need. And then of course it warns you, hey, make sure you actually upload your image to your CMS or wherever it's going to live. And then you can just take that, copy, paste, boom, it's done. There's no worrying about multiple vendor tags. There's no worried about, I forgot this OG tag in this certain way. It's all organized, it's all clean, and I will certainly be using it in the future. And what I really like about it in terms of the UI of this website is the fact that I can easily toggle between them. So right now, when I want to test a Twitter URL, Twitter doesn't, at least in my experience, Twitter doesn't actually pop up with the Twitter card. So if you want to share a link to something, and let's say that particular link is configured properly so that it has an image, the title, the link, etc., all the stuff that Twitter cards are compatible with. If you say want to confirm that before, it doesn't actually pull in a preview like it would on Facebook. Like Facebook generally will actually generate the preview while you're typing. In my experience, it doesn't do that. So I have to go to, and it is still an official resource, but it's the Twitter URL card validator, if I remember the name correctly. But right now, like, I'd rather not have to, check on Facebook, then check on this, then check on that. I would rather, when I make a website, especially if it's something like the HTML All the Things website, if I want to go in there and make sure that everything's dynamic, so, I type in an article title, it automatically pulls that in, it automatically puts in my images, it automatically does that. I'm definitely going to be using this website to check all that and adjust them as needed, just to ensure that everything is working properly. I think that, and also in addition to this is really helpful for your customer base as well, because you could easily say like, they only have a Twitter account, as a lot of people will, or they only have a Facebook or whatever it is, or maybe they only use a couple of them. You can easily toggle them off in the actual in the interface there. You can just turn off Slack and all the rest of them. You can just have those two, maybe Facebook and Twitter, and you could just see those, and you could even show your customer and be like, hey, this is what it should look like, is this good with you, that type of thing. So it's just a really easy to use application that does like a real simple function but does it really well. And I just kind of stumbled upon it when I was trying to fix up a customer's metadata. So it's really killer, actually. I really enjoy the interface, and it's a really nice little app to have right there. Another thing that it also kind of brings to mind is the fact that if you're a UI developer like me, you're kind of plagued by the fact of like, how many vendor tags should I be including, Moz and WebKit and all that, because different browser versions, support it. It only supports this property if it's this version, and it, it's, you need to put the WebKit tag, but sometimes it accepts the generic one. Well, something like Vue.js will generally put in a lot of those vendor tags for you, and that's kind of what this is doing. So at the end of the day, like for the most part, if I'm working on a new site, let's say even tomorrow, I would just put my title and my meta tags in there, or my meta description tag in there, and then I would actually let this thing I'd put up the test site or whatever. I'd let this tool detect the website for me, or I could even just type in the title and the description right there. It's no big deal. And I can just make sure that it all looks nice, and then I would generate the tags and use that. Another thing that's also really helpful on the site is there is a bit of a resource section. So it does explain a lot of the parts, like, your description shouldn't be this big, your title shouldn't be this big, but it shouldn't be too short, etc., etc. It does a full explanation. So for anyone who has a hands-on customer, if you send them there and you say, hey, take a look at your website, just type in your URL at the top, take a look at your website that I've built, see if you like it. They can actually go in and be like, that's what the description does, that's what this does. That's for more of a hands-on customer, but sometimes you have those, and it's just nice to have a resource where you can just send them to it, and you don't have to worry about explaining all that stuff yourself. So go check out metatags.io. There will be a link in the description for this tool, and as far as I'm aware, it's completely free. I've been using it for the last couple of days, and I really enjoy it. Unless Mike has any comment about this useful resource, I think we can move on to the web news, because it is a lengthy web news this week.
Yeah, no real comments. I've never used the meta tags, but it sounds pretty cool. I remember being a little bit of a headache with HTML All the Things site when I was working on that. So maybe it could have helped at least get generate some for us. But yeah, I'll definitely check it out in the future. So thanks for that.
Alrighty, well, let's jump right into web news then. So, web news, laser focus in a scatterbrained industry. So, this web news is more of just a straight up conversation driver. I don't really have an answer to this, but I think it's something that we can all relate to. And I'm going to get into this. It's about a page of notes here, so I'm just going to kind of start reading now, and then Mike and I'll have a discussion as per the usual. So if you work for a big company or listen to business gurus, laser focus is a commonly used phrase that has essentially become a buzzword of sorts. It's generally used to describe the need for a team to focus on something important, such as a new project that's coming up, or a meeting, or meeting a very important deadline. Oftentimes, it's used to describe the general direction of a business, especially if a business is new or is evolving with the times. The administration will generally ask for the staff to remain laser focused on their new movement or business strategy and to ensure continued success. This laser focus is also applied to beginner entrepreneurs when discussing the prospect of success. Gurus will often talk up working in their preferred industry, but then, as you start to learn a little bit, they'll bring it back down to earth and say things like, hey, this is not a get rich quick thing. You need to stay laser focused on your goal to succeed. There's no other way around it. So at the end of the day, being laser focused on a goal is sound advice, but when it comes to complex projects, that laser focused goal has to be more general and can easily lead you down the path to distraction and eventual failure. The website industry is all over the place when it comes to almost every single aspect. So a couple of examples: prices are wildly different from agency to agency for the exact same product. Building out projects can take several different skill sets or investments into services that are essentially outsource contractors. So for example, maybe you design and develop the whole site yourself, but then you want to make sure that your customer gets good SEO result and you're not really specialized in that. So you hire an SEO specialist just for that project, basically subcontracting out that part of the project, and then they can help optimize that Google search result, that type of thing. And sometimes businesses don't have any branding ready at all, which results in the need for illustrators or other related artists to make up logos and color schemes and the whole thing. And don't forget about the fact that websites are always online. So when they go down, someone needs to support them, pulling your attention away from new projects that you have on the go. You're always kind of brought back to those old projects. You're not really closing the book on them forever. When you're starting out by yourself or in a small team, you'll inevitably have to become the jack of all trades in order to keep everything running smoothly, especially when you don't have the capital to hire individuals to run each aspect of the business individually. So herein lies the question: how do you remain laser focused when the industry you're in is so scatterbrained? And one possible solution might be to make the goal more general, but if the goal is just to make money, which is a very general goal, then there's way too many solutions to that problem that will hardly result in any sort of laser focus. So we kind of suffer from this issue constantly. We'll say something like, let's just focus on money for the next few months. And then before we know it, we got 3 app concepts, some marketing plans for client work, and nothing actually ever comes to fruition or gets done. And even No BS News was completed for the purposes of the code challenge, but then kind of hasn't been published further than that because of another possible money-making opportunity came knocking with all this other client work. And of course, you have to do your own priorities, but it'd be nice to kind of have that project in its completion just done and not forgotten, but done and actually published. So herein lies the question, and I'll kind of let Mike kind of comment on this. How do you remain focused in the web development / design industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. Currently with the client work that I'm doing right now, that's been a big stress point probably. So essentially having to do some project management. You have to be a project manager, having to do some client meetings. You have to be able to present to the client. You have to be able to talk to the clients. You have to know what you're talking about, doing the actual development of the project, and also supporting your team, teaching your team some skills here and there. Yeah, it's been tough. And it's a good question. I didn't even think of it as a hindrance, but really in a lot of other industries that aren't as scatterbrained as web development, you can focus on one thing and you can maybe become a big expert at that one thing. And but with at least where we are right now in the industry, and I don't see it changing anytime soon, I feel like you have to be a jack of all trades. I feel like you have to put on many hats and work through it. What I do now is I really try to separate all of my tasks. So if it's a project management task, I do them all in a bulk kind of session. If it's development, I try to sit down and develop. You know what I mean? So I really when I'm doing a task, I try to focus on that task. And if it's encompassing one of these skills that we have to know, like a management skill or something like that, I try to really focus on that skill. So if I know that a meeting's coming up, then I not only focus it on the meeting, I usually have a good prep session before the meeting to get my mind out of a developer standpoint, because when you're a developer and you're thinking in development terms, you're going to talk very much in talk that maybe in a meeting, a lot of your clients won't understand, or a lot of the players in that meeting won't understand. So you have to really get the knowledge down to their level, get the terminology down to their level. So I like to do a good amount of prep before a meeting to make sure that I'm on that level. I know what I'm talking about. I know what the meeting's about. I don't like to go in nervous to a meeting. I pretty much never have that happen. I'm usually fairly prepared. That's kind of one of my things. Like I remember in school, I used to do a lot of my group presentations. I used to be the one to go up there, and it's just because like I would do enough prep work. I wouldn't go overboard, but I do enough prep work where I wouldn't be super nervous. And as long as that was the case, then I didn't mind, talking in front of the class. And there were certain situations, obviously, where you don't have the time to do that prep work. If I was in the state of like not knowing what I'm talking about and I went up there, it was a disaster. And I've had that happen before, and that's just like, I don't want to relive that again. But pretty much, I very much try to avoid not being prepared for meetings. So that's one thing for like just as an example of that. Then there's just development. Before development, I like to kind of, if I've done, project management before or task management before, I like to kind of stand up, take a walk, get a coffee, sit down, and then my development begins. So I like to kind of separate my different skill sets, I think, or my different focuses with certain aspects of my day. So I don't know if that answers your question too much, Matt, but it's definitely, I definitely understand where you're coming from with this, and yeah, just wonder what your feedback on all that is.
Well, yeah, that's kind of interesting with the separation thing, because I find myself kind of doing the same thing. Like even if I'll like do something really quick. So for example, maybe I'll sit down at my desk and maybe there's 3 tasks that a customer has asked me to do. One of them is like really easy, and the next one is I got to like dive into the CSS hard. Even if it's like the first 10-15 minutes at the desk, I'll spend that 15 minutes fixing that easy thing. And then I will just kind of get up and just be like standing around, and I'll literally, like, even just beside my desk sometimes, maybe I'll get a coffee, but I'll generally just maybe go on social media at that point or something, just for a couple of minutes, just to separate that thing. Because like it's not so much a question of multitasking. It's also like your brain is changing mentality. Like if you had 10 easy tasks that were all similar for 10 different clients, that's not really that hard. When it's like, oh, do this small thing and then dive hard into something else that's like a unrelated or a loosely related topic, it's hard to get your brain to like click into that other mode. So you kind of need that separation. So I think that's actually sound advice. I never even really picked up on the fact that I was doing that until you mentioned that. That's kind of interesting. Because I find myself getting up a lot, and sometimes I'll be like, man, I'm wasting a lot of time. But it's like, at the same time, if I just sit there, I'm also slower in general. So I'm not actually wasting time, if that makes sense. And it's not like I'm getting up for an hour or anything. But yeah, so that's interesting. I think.
It's almost like an instinctive thing too, because I like you said, I don't even think about it as well. Like I don't think about like how am I going to separate this work from this work. Really, it just happens. Like every time that I have like if I'm, for instance, answering emails and I finish answering emails and I have to switch to doing development, I don't just like open up my VS Code and start coding. I don't think I've ever done that. What I do is like you said, go on Twitter or Reddit or something for like a few minutes, and then I go and start coding, or I get up and get a drink, go grab a coffee, maybe have some lunch or something like that. So I pretty much always separate every single one of my major tasks throughout the day, and that I think that helps. I think that's a big help in what I've been doing. I mean, lately I've been doing a lot of task management, like I was saying at the start of this episode, and I've been doing a lot of inputting to-dos and stuff into my to-do manager, which is Todoist. And I do that as well. Like, I treat that as its own kind of, task as well. Like, I can't sit there and code, then go into the to-do list, do to-do list management, and then go right back to coding. I can't do context switching on that level. What I do is I, finish my coding, and then before I go to bed, I will go into my to-do manager, see what I've done, check off everything that I've done. If I figure something out before I go to bed, I'll write it into that to-do manager, like what I need to do for the next day. I'll set my goals, and then I'll go to bed. So like I very much compartmentalize every single one of my major tasks throughout the day. Again, without really thinking about it. It's just how I've been working.
And I would say I do something similar. So like, I mean, we both come from an IT background, but I kind of like latched on to how IT manages their tasks. And a lot of the things that, like, even if you send it to me, I'm always just like, oh, send it like a commission and I'll add it like a ticket. And I don't have a ticketing software per se, but I treat everything sort of like that. And I just kind of go through and mentally I'll be like, okay, this is a priority. This can be done real quick, even though it's not a priority. Let's do that. This is a priority. Let's maybe do this before this, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of do everything like a ticket, and I'll just sort of check it off if I have it written down, or I will jot it down in my logbook if I'm just, taking logs that day, whatever. But I treat a lot of stuff like IT would a ticket, really. And I just kind of go through and be like, okay, doing this, then now doing this, now doing this, now doing this. And I'm doing it such that I don't care necessarily about the big picture. And I'm not saying that I like literally don't care about the big picture, but in terms of, oh, this is going to be a busy day, I don't going to like stress myself out about where the project is as it sits. I need to do these maybe 4 things today. So I'm just going to do those like tickets. Okay, this ticket's done. That one, that one, that one. And then it's just done. And I'm not worrying or focusing on the fact of like, oh my God, like this project's not done. I just do those 4 tasks. Okay, those are done, moving on, kind of thing. So I don't know whether like maybe I should be jotting some of that down, or like what, or I mean, I'm sure there's someone better at organizing than us, certainly, but that is one thing I do as well. Another thing that I will say that's kind of a pitfall in terms of this industry, and like we've fallen into it several times, is the fact that it's too hard to chase something, and it's difficult when it's not as easy as it appears, if that makes sense. So it's like we'll be in, let's say we start working in Webflow, and I'm exploring Webflow, I'm learning it, right? So I'm exploring all the avenues of it, looking at the community, checking everything out. And then I go, oh, they have like templates for sale, and there's a need for like Webflow templates. Oh, let's make those. And so it's just like, it's an easy decision to make. And so you like invest like a small amount of time into it, which is still wasted time, because it's like you invest a small amount of time into it, you realize, oh, this is like this, maybe no one's going to buy my template, and I'm just not going to do it right now because I have client work that's going to pay me guaranteed. So you kind of back off. And even though it was only a little bit of time spent, it's still like wasted time. And that's sort of where those really general goals come into play. Because we'll go into Webflow, for example, with the thought of like, oh, this is going to be a really great editor. Let's invest a bunch of time into learning it. And at the same time, you're thinking, well, if I'm learning all this, I could make some more money off of this, which is absolutely true. But you get blinded by the fact of like, a template is essentially just a website in this particular instance. It's essentially just a website without the client calling you and without the content management for the most part. You're just putting in your own random content. And so you get blinded by the fact of like, oh, there's money on the table, let's go get it. When in reality, you really should be like, oh, let's balance the client work, and maybe when that's done, I'll add this to my wish list of possible things I could do with Webflow, that type of thing. And that's where you get pulled in multiple directions, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's tough to go down like sometimes you get gun-ho about something really quickly and you waste a significant amount of time on it, and it turns out into nothing. And unfortunately that happens quite often, especially in our industry with all the changing technologies out there. But I think it's kind of one of those, like, you have to cut it off at some point, and you have to know when to do that, and that comes with experience. It's a tough one. It is a tough. The other tough thing is like getting sidetracked. Let's say you're in one of your tasks, and like let's say you're developing, and you get a unsolicited call or from a client. Those kinds of things really really sidetrack me. So, and it like I said before, I like to prepare for my meetings. I like to be, well aware of what we're going to be talking about, or at least somewhat aware of what we're going to be talking about, so I know where we're coming from. When I get a call in the middle of my programming, I am usually not prepared for it. So sometimes it's a difficult thing. So I mostly always answer them, and some of those conversations don't really lead to a good resolution, in my opinion. Like, if someone were to schedule a call with me, I think that would have been much more efficient, because I could spend the time to understand what their problem is. So just like, a simple email, let's schedule a call for later on, and then we'll have a call, rather than just call me randomly throughout the day and ask me about a very specific thing. Especially if it's someone that I haven't talked to, a client that I haven't talked to in a few months, and I'm not obviously fully invested in their project currently at the time. I need some time to rev myself back up and understand their project. Obviously, an email at that point to let's schedule a call would be much more beneficial, because I could rev myself back up again, prep for the meeting like I always do. And we can have a very good back and forth discussion about the problem that they're having, or the thing that they want to implement, or whatever. An unsolicited call will catch me off guard most of the time, and I won't be able to provide the feedback that I generally like to provide for any sort of questions or any sort of problems that people are having. So those are the kinds of things that can really almost, I wouldn't say derail my day, but really take me out of the rhythm of programming. Sometimes I do put my phone on silent when I really need to get features done. I don't like to do it very often, because sometimes obviously there's situations where clients should be calling and should have conversations and stuff like that, and I'm open to that for the most part. But again, if it's something very specific about a project that I worked on months ago, perhaps even weeks ago in this industry, I'm working on so many different projects at the same time that context switching is a very mind intensive thing for me. A quick email to say let's schedule a call for even 20 minutes from then would be easier for me to handle than an unsolicited phone call randomly throughout the day. I don't know how you feel about those. I'm sure you get those quite often.
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's a really good point. Is sometimes it's like money calling, really. You think
Yep.
a client's calling. Maybe they have a new venture. Maybe they just want something quickly fixed. Maybe they're even talking to you about a billing concern. And so it's literally money calling. And you think to yourself, well, I need to obviously have my revenue maintain, or I need to maintain my revenue. So you specifically think okay, I'll focus on this right now, but you don't realize how much you're kind of knocked out of the groove of stuff. It's so if you notice, if you track your work at all, speaking more toward the audience, because I know that we've had this discussion before, but it's like you can finish let's say 9 hours of work sometimes in 4 hours, and then other times it's you sit there for 9 hours and you finish 4 hours of work, and it's just because you're in the groove. So you're just okay, this one, bang 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 bang, gonna finish all these tasks. Sometimes you have those 4 tasks, let's say 4 tasks scheduled for the day, you finish that in the morning, or you finish that in your first 4 hours of work, and you're I might as well do another 4 hours to get ahead. And oftentimes it's because sometimes you're lucky and things don't go wrong, but other times it's because you're just in the groove and you're really going quickly, and it's hard to get in that groove. And those client calls are necessary, but they also oftentimes knock you off of almost say off your high horse. That doesn't make any sense. Off you're out of the groove now. You get pulled out of that mindset, and now it's hard to get back into the groove and really try to finish some stuff. I think I agree with you in that one sense where you were saying you sometimes turn off your phone. I will do the same sometimes. I will choose to be okay, this needs to get done today, and if I don't get it done today, I know it's going to be a panic fest next week or whatever. So I am not answering calls, because I know that missing one call is going to be generally less hurtful to the business than me being okay, I'm not going to. You know what I mean? I'll just keep taking calls, and then I'm just not going to finish that task today. Finishing that task, if that is the priority, sometimes needs to take priority over a phone call, because that person can always leave a voicemail. You can always call back, that type of thing. And if it's really an emergency, sometimes they'll email you, whatever. And it sucks to miss those emails, but at the same time, it's like you don't want to piss off the client you're working for, with that rush task, and the client that's trying to call you. You don't want to piss everybody off. So sometimes you just need to say, okay, that's it. Do your own priority the way you normally would, but just, you really need to have that priority train. But that being said, having a bad experience with that is really hard to turn back from. Like, for example, if you and I both decided for whatever reason that we weren't going to answer calls that day, and then something major went down that day, that's really not good. And that would maybe turn us off to doing that. And I'm sure that that's happened to people, which is why I bring it up. I'm sure it's happened to people in IT where they're like, I'm spinning up a new project. I'm doing this. I'm not going to check my email. And then it ends up being a major incident, and some sort of manager or some sort of administrative team has been like, yo, you got to fix this. You got to fix this. Where are you? And it really sucks. And that type of stuff, I don't have a solution for. And that's why I think this web news is more of a question in a lot of cases than it is an answer. We have our answers. We have our stuff that we've learned as we've been discussing this whole time. But it's difficult to balance that, I think. I don't know whether you've had experience like that, but
yeah. So, and that's the difficulty of wearing many hats. I think. I one thing that sometimes I envy is the developers that can just go to work, and in their case, I don't see any issue with them turning off their phone if they're working on one project. If they're working for a company on one project, and they have like an in-project communication system and all that, I would probably turn off my phone as soon as I got to work. That's what I would do. The problem is that we are a development company, and we own the company. We do the development and we do the company management. And us missing calls is, could be very detrimental, not only to like an IT issue, but it could also be detrimental to a missed opportunity. So let's say someone finds our phone number and wants a site, they could call us. And if we, turn off our phone and miss that call, it's, first impressions are very important. They could think that we're too busy. They could think that we're screening their calls, whatever. They have their own right to think whatever they want. Some people are very adamant about being listened to right away. A lot of people are reasonable, and they understand when you don't get a call, obviously, then you call them back and you say that, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have the situation where first impressions mean a lot, and you've missed the call, and that's it, that you lost the opportunity. So you got to weigh those things. So like Matt said, like I've said, sometimes you have to turn the phone off, you have to focus, but I do it very rarely. Like I think I've done it once in this past month where I've actually turned the phone on silent to work. I generally will leave it on as much as I possibly can, just in case something like that happens. And I'll generally answer almost every call, just because we are wearing that business owner hat and we have to take all the opportunities that we can get. We're very much in the stage of being able to pivot into whatever section of the business we want. We even had a discussion right before this podcast about like all the opportunities that are coming up to us, and the fact that we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. And with that kind of mindset comes the need for being able to put on many hats, the need for being able to project manage, the need for being able to develop, the need for being able to answer emails, task manage, do some finances, do some taxes, like doing all that all at the same time, switching throughout the day. So I think that this web news really, there isn't a solution for it. I think that this is the negative, like this is one of the hardships of being a business owner. Thankfully, there's two of us, which is already an advantage for a lot of people. I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that are themselves just freelancers, and you're technically, if you're a freelancer, you are a business of yourself. You're freelancing your own time, and you have to manage that depending on what you do. But it would be a little bit harder. At least like you and I can kind of pass some responsibilities back and forth on each other depending on how busy we are. Like right now, you're doing a lot of the business relations stuff, which is helping me a lot to focus on the client work, the big contracts that we have, which helps. It would be a lot harder, obviously, if I was alone, just doing everything that's business related on my own, even without any of other projects to talk about, but even just managing the business. So it's a situation to a situation kind of thing. Don't think there's a solution for it. I think you just kind of you really have to manage your time. I would recommend for you, Matt, to try to do some task management, like try to use a task manager, whether that be just a to-do list or like an Asana type task manager, and just try to like fully stick to it. I'm trying right now, and I haven't been very good at it, I would say. I think I'm getting a little bit better at being consistent with the task management, and I think it is making me more productive throughout the day, and it is making me more focused on the current task at hand. Whereas without the task management, I was a little bit more scatterbrained, if that makes sense.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that as well, actually, because one of the things I was actually thinking of, because I saw an advertisement for it on YouTube, was that maybe, especially since we're considering possibly hiring someone this year, maybe we need to start standardizing a lot of our tasks. And I was thinking of that myself because I saw an advertisement for, I always forget the acronym. I think it's called the CRM. I always forget the thing. I know what it is, but like
customer relations management.
That's it. Yeah, I always forget the acronym for that.
Customer. Yeah.
But yeah, so that's what it is. And what I was thinking is like maybe we need to start standardizing everything. And there's like some free ones out there, especially free to start, right? Stuff like that. And I was kind of thinking to myself, like, maybe we need to have like a standard quoting document. You know, we kind of have a standard procedure where we quote people, but we don't have a standard quoting document per se. Maybe we need to have that. Maybe we need to have like a standardized, like something we could teach to someone. And the way I was thinking of it the other day was like, if it's so easy that it's teachable, then we'll fly through it because we made it. Like we made the procedure. And that's what I was I don't know, I was just kind of like spitballing in my own head. But that's kind of one of the things I was thinking of, because like we should really, like, for example, like we use Trello. Trello is extremely valuable to Hat specifically because we put all the links in there, or, you know, we have all our references in there. And so if we need to pull up something about episode 19, you know, some random episode, we have all the links right there. And you can just go back there and you can see them all. And you can link to any of the services, make sure it's working. Let's say someone's complaining about it not working on Google Play Music specifically. We could just quickly go in there and hit that, no problem. But if somebody were to say, hey, can you go look at my old quote? I don't know where that is. I don't. You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, we could find it. Yeah. We could find it, but it's not as instant.
Yeah. It isn't. Yeah, we do need, I think you're right. We do need some more to work on some procedures and stuff like that. Like, because like you said, if we hire someone, we're going to spend more time training them than actually getting any use from them. And so, yeah, we need to standardize some stuff. Because it's not a bad idea, especially if we ever have time. The problem is we never have time to put these standards. We never have time to do on any of these things that we say. And this is another one of those things, like the scatterbrain thing and the business owner thing, where you just don't have time to do business management stuff that you should be doing all along. Maybe we're just in that phase right now, or we're just kind of growing pretty quickly, and everything's on our plate. But we for sure need to somehow manage that time a little bit better. I'm trying really hard to kind of compartmentalize and try to get as much out of a day as I possibly can at this point, because I just don't have choice. Hopefully that will, once the client work dies down a little bit, that will come back to me putting more time into stuff like that, like creating systems and management for our company. Yeah, that's the plan at least.
And like to build on that is, I think that when you're saying, you know, get the most out of a day, it'd be really nice to have some stuff be automated, you know, automate some stuff. There's I remember talking to a specialist in this area a few months ago, and he was saying that you can get a document, like a word processor that has like modular pieces. That would be huge for us. You know, you make a standard quote, like you make a quote that you like. And so you know, kind of delete all the specific customer data, and then you modularize it such that it goes into this, I don't even know what it's called anymore, but this like modular word processor, and then you have that. And you just kind of go with it. Also, managing a customer through a fixed procedure would be super nice. Like whether you assign them to, you know, like I think we mentioned this before, where some customers, they want to go quick, they want to fast track, so we won't do a prototype, we'll just do a wireframe, especially if it's something really simple. Whereas others want the whole treatment, and so that's they would be put into a different procedure, and we should standardize those procedures. But you're right, it's like, I don't have time to standardize. I want to get this done. Okay, it's done. Oh, someone else called. It's not so easy. So you're right. I don't think there is a solution. I think this might just be straight up growing pains. That's a really good question. But I don't know. I mean, short of listening to, business podcasts all over the place, because I don't think anything specifically named this. Heck, this episode isn't even specifically named this. But like where you would find advice particularly, it's not like I've looked it up, but like, it's a good question, and every business is unique. So even that, but I don't know, maybe a CRM is something I'll be looking at, and maybe try to standardize things as I do them. Like, next time I do a quote, let's just standardize it. Let's take that extra 2 hours and standardize this. We're taking this customer through the procedure. I'll spend an extra 2 hours, and let's make this a type of procedure that we use on a quick customer. And then the next time there's like a more detail oriented customer. Oh, that's, procedure 2 or something. And maybe
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, because honestly, like our episodes, you don't handle the episodes for this podcast, but for example, these episodes are in a particular, all my media is in a particular folder structure. It's named in a particular way. It's named all the same thing. All our Trello entries are done in a particular fashion. They're labeled in a particular way. Social media management, same thing. That's all done in Trello. That's done in a particular way. That's all standardized. It's not written down, but it is standardized. And so that would be something like that. There's the building block. Because look how quickly we bang out an episode. It takes a while to record and all that. But we've had emergency episodes where it's like, oh, we're too busy. Let's just record and then immediately publish, essentially.
Yep.
So maybe we need to start applying that type of thing to this. We'll kind of see there. But I think that's ultimately the question. And I think it'd be really good for any of you guys in the audience to kind of, talk, maybe whether you've been through growing pains or whether you're worried about them or whether you think that we just need to do something different, whatever that is, whether that be get a CRM. What's the acronym again, me and Mike?
So it's Customer Relations Management.
Okay. I always think it's content every time because it's CMS. Like I always think CMS. So anyway, I know that's a weird quirk of mine, but I don't know why that is. But anyway, so maybe we need to do a CRM. Maybe we need to do whatever. And you guys will be with us on that journey. We'll be talking about that on the podcast, maybe writing some pieces on it, whatever comes up. But I think that getting any insight from you guys would be super valuable. You can message us on any of the socials or whatever, and that'd be cool advice. What have you guys done to deal with any sort of growing pains? What is your plan to deal with it if you haven't dealt with it yet? That type of thing. And what do you have any advice for us? Like, what's your advice? Are we doing something wrong? Are we doing it right? Is this normal? What is it? Right? I don't know. I don't think I have any more comment unless you do, Mike.
Yeah, no, I think we can wrap it up.
Alrighty, well, let's run the old conclusion then. So thanks for listening, and make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing on the platform of your choice. You can also follow us on the socials via @HTML All the Things. That's on Facebook and Instagram. On Twitter, we are @HTML Everything. We are on Medium. We are also on GitHub. And make sure you'd like to support us. Remember, we are on Patreon. I don't know why I changed the intro to that. Remember, we are on Patreon via patreon.com/HTML all the things. Check out the tiers and give that a go. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and we are signing off.